Hi, Alicia. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. This is the first of what will be a series, and I don't know how many or how long I'm going to do it, but I want to put some episodes or some videos. I'm just recording things with you and others from who are members of the Feminist Podcast Collective, which I will link to wherever this exists so that you can learn more about us. Because I want to showcase our members. I want to talk about podcasting. I want to talk about community, and I want to talk about your show and whatever else comes out of this. So maybe you could start, Alicia, by telling us who you are and what your shows are.
I'm Alicia, and I have a micro agency that is for launching and producing podcasts. And I have two shows currently. And who knows when you might be watching this? One of those might have been Sunset at that point, which I'm actually very excited about. We're coming up on 300 episodes of Podcasting Unlocked, which is crazy banana pants, but super exciting. And then I have, which is a podcast just about podcasting, very, very meta. And then I have a podcast that is all about smutty romance, where I highlight diverse creators, diverse authors, and just talk about how romance can quite literally change your life.
I want to talk about sunsetting a podcast and what that's about and everything. Before we go there, though, I want you to complete this sentence. I podcast because.
I podcast because I know that it changes lives. I know it's like, I have context though. So when I launched my very first podcast, my second podcast, it wasn't my first one, my second podcast with my sister, we were talking about cults from the perspective of having grown up in one. And at the time, there were a lot of podcasts about cults, but not from that perspective. It was either like people who were into true crime, wanting to talk about cults, or comedians wanting to talk about cults, right? And there's nothing wrong with either of those things, but not a lot from the perspective of having grown up in one. And the number of people that reached out, even within the first week of the podcast launching, and said, "Oh my goodness, me too." I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only person that had that childhood. I thought I was the only one who had experiences like this. And just the ability to quite honestly change someone's life. And then fast forward my podcast on podcasting, where, I'm sharing all these different tips and tricks and things that are working, and like, pick what's going to work for you. And I get messages constantly of like, I binge listened to your entire show and here's how my podcast is doing, or I launched my podcast and I'm so excited and here's how it's changing. And I really think podcasting can honestly just change lives. It's incredible.
It is incredible, and I love that. And you've been doing it a long time. 300 episodes is a long time, and that's not even your first show. So when did you start podcasting?
I started guesting in 2016, and then I started my first podcast in 2017.
And that was the one about the cult, or that was the second one?
No, that was the second one was the one about cults. The first one was a podcast specifically for product businesses because of my background's in manufacturing and supply chain. And so I wanted to help small businesses who had product businesses, but they just wanted to create, like, how do you market this? How do you grow this? And so that was called the Honest Product Bench. I'm not great at naming things. It's fine. And so that's what it was called. And I realized very quickly I did not like talking about the things I was doing at work on a podcast. And so I was like, let's shift this. I wonder if I could do something different. Then I wanted to do something with my sister, and I knew we'd wanted to share kind of our story and our journey. And it was just a way for us to stay connected. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and I have just the one sister. The rest are boys. And so it was just our way of just checking in with each other and making sure each other were okay. But also to kind of process. Our mom passed away in 2019, and we couldn't ask the question of why did you join that cult? And so it was our way of like, why do people join cults? Why did we stay there for 10 years? What was going on behind the scenes, and how do people get sucked into these things? And so that's where it really took off for me, is like, oh, this is a thing. And I wonder if I could do this for other people.
Can people still listen to that show? The cult one?
Yep.
What's it called?
2 sisters and a cult. And people can still listen. We still get about 100 downloads a week. So people still listen.
That's amazing. Okay, so you started out with a podcast that was like talking about what you do. And I think so many people think that's the obvious, business owners anyway, often think like, that's
Right.
what I got to do. That's the thing that makes sense. And what you discovered is, I don't really love this. This doesn't actually feel all that great. So then you did something that was more just truly like, I'm just interested in this. I want to explore this. Why not hit record while we have these conversations that I want to have anyway? Something happens with the record as well that like unlocks a conversation in a new way, I've discovered. as I've been doing a podcast that's similar with my friend Taina, and just like we can have the conversations and not record them. But there's just something different, I think, that happens when you do that. So that's fun. And then you obviously added the podcasting podcast, which again was in support of your business. What made that different than the first time you were doing one that was like in support of your business? Because it went 300 episodes. So obviously there was something about it that you liked.
I started doing podcasting for other people first. So I did that for about 2 years before I was like, I guess I should have a podcast. Right? Because I was finding I was having some of the same conversations, or people were asking a lot of questions in my DMs. And I was like, I know I need to create consistent content. Blogging's fine, but I really like podcasting. I like being able to just chat at a mic and maybe have a conversation with someone I've never met, use it to create connections, but really thinking about it as like growth for my business, but also growth for networking. And once I kind of focused on that, I was like, all right, we can do this. So I did that every week for a few years, and then I added it to twice a week. I've done different projects in between. So like 1 year, I wanted to do a solo episode project where I was answering podcasting questions in 10 minutes or less. So that is called Successful Podcasting Unlocked. And then I realized I really like that format of just kind of like quick and dirty. Let's get to the point and move on. Like, here's your tip, go. And so I added Tuesdays, and then every other week is replays of those bonus episodes, and then some more live questions of like, hey, what's going on in podcasting? So like most recent one was like Substack, having a podcast side. Like, what do you do? Is it worth it? Does it make sense for your business? What are your goals? All that stuff. So yeah, I liked moving it to twice a week. I didn't have any problems with that, but I found that I was having a lot of the same conversations over and over again, to where I'm like, I don't love it anymore. And I'm really loving the side project a lot more.
Yeah,
So
let's talk about that one.
how can we shift to where I do less of that and then more of the thing that I'm actually
Because you
really
started,
enjoying?
you say you can't name things, but come on, We Read Smut is fantastic. So We Read Smut, which you started, I feel like it's been at least a year now, maybe more.
Yes, it's been a year and a half.
Year and
So
a
we
half.
started January 2025.
There you go. And that one has obviously really taken off, and maybe ways that have even surprised you. There's a Substack and then also podcast that it's all about, like you said, reading romance. And you specifically are focusing around romance that are focused on people of color, if I'm not mistaken, or is it all marginalized identities? I'm not sure what the focus area is.
Yeah, so my focus is BIPOC and LGBTQIA+. That's where I always try to prioritize. That doesn't mean that that's the only identities. We do have disabled folks that have been in the show who are not LGBTQIA+ or BIPOC. And so it's really just been wanting to highlight people who don't get on the big podcasts because of their marginalized identities, and kind of following the questions or the curiosities that I have around, hey, I read this trope and I have questions, or I have thoughts, or let's talk about it, or what's your favorite trope, and kind of digging into recommendations that you don't typically see on, from the big five publishers, because it tends to be white authors.
Yeah. And this is obviously not related to your business specifically, and that it's not specifically about podcasting because you're, running a boutique sort of podcast production studio. This is not related to that. And yet it's where you're shifting your focus. So before we go into the why, because I want to hear a little bit about that journey, because I think it's maybe even surprised you, but what were your feelings about sunsetting a podcast? Because I think you've already had two that have come and gone, now a third that you're about to say goodbye to, and you've been changing and exploring new passions. I think sometimes people think, I think one of the things that'll keep people from starting a podcast is this idea of, I don't know if I'm going to love that for 10 years or whatever. And it's like,
Right.
do you have to? So what are your thoughts about letting go of a podcast, starting anew? Like, what goes into your process on deciding when it's time or if it's okay to say goodbye, all of that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I was very adamant about when I started my business and when I started my podcast on podcasting, it was called Listeners to Leads originally. And my focus was, all right, how can we turn our listeners into leads, be really strategic with our podcast? And I realized I wanted to expand that audience. So I did that, right? So sometimes it's a matter of, can I shift slightly or expand the audience, or, maybe narrow in the audience? Do I really need a brand new podcast, or do I need to stop this one? And so I expanded the audience, really enjoyed that, loved having those conversations, and got to a point where I realized I just wasn't having fun anymore. And one thing I'm constantly telling people is if a ongoing podcast doesn't make sense for you, start with a limited series. Bookend it. Like 10 episodes, 12 episodes, 25 episodes, 52 episodes, right? Like it could be a whole year of just exploring something, and give yourself those bookends if you're hesitant. And you might find, actually, I want to keep going. I want to keep doing this thing. But it's really just you get to decide what's going to work best for you. And so it was actually funny because when I mentioned to my team, hey, I know this sounds weird, but I'm getting to 300 this year. I think I want to stop at 300. They were like, yeah, we feel it. Like from hearing the conversations, from hearing
Yeah.
my energy in the episodes, they were like, yeah, it makes sense. You've done enough at this point, and we can repurpose the content. We can do all these things. And so that helped alleviate kind of my stress of like, should I let this go? Am I still like a strategist if I don't have a podcast? Sure. I've got plenty of content and experience.
You will have a podcast, you just don't have a podcast about
Right.
podcasting. And I think sometimes people think that they need to have a podcast that's directly related to their business. And I think that can be helpful for sure. I think there's also space, though, for you to show up as a real human that allows
Right.
people to see you as a human. And so pursuing a passion, doing something that's interesting, asking an interesting question, whether that's alone or having conversations with people or whatever, if it invites people in to get to know you better, I still feel like, and I don't know, I'm curious since you're a podcasting person, but I feel like it's also still a really can be a part of your marketing efforts, even if it's not like, here I am showing up in my business expertise, talking about my, what I do and how I can help you. It's more, especially if you're a service provider, it's like, get to know me as a human. Do you want to work with me? Here's like some of the stuff I get excited about. Here's me lit up and, interested. Do you like that? So is that part of what you talk to people about too? If they're like, I need to have a podcast about my business, but I don't really want to talk about my business.
Yeah. So I haven't had that experience yet. But I have been having a lot of conversations lately with people who are like, I want a side quest. I want a side project. Is that something you can help me with? Where I think, 5, 6 years ago, it was like, all right, how can I help you launch a podcast for your business and like grow that? But now I'm finding a lot of the connections I'm making are actually, I just want to have questions. I had somebody recently, they were like, I want to talk to the incredible men in my life to combat the manosphere. Like, what makes you a great man? What are the things that you're doing? Is it therapy? Is it, having a role model in your life, right? Like, that's a side quest, has nothing to do with her day job at all, but is something she wants to explore. I had another conversation with someone. It was going to be two gay men. They wanted to have a podcast specifically around like theater and going to Broadway and doing like, and so it's been more about finding like following your curiosity with passions. And I'm here for it. I love it. I think that makes my job more exciting too, because I can only listen to so many podcasts on perimenopause and life coaching for perimenopause and menopause. I
Oh,
love you guys so much.
I'm
I'm
going
almost
through it
there. I
and
don't want to think about it.
I don't really want to think about it anymore either. But I wish I didn't have to. But yes, I think that so many of us have things that we're so interested in. Like, I just know so many people who are like multi passionates or polymaths or whatever word you want to use. And we feel like we're not allowed to express those things unless
Right.
they're somehow directly in service of our business. And I just think it's important for us to think about like opening that up. And a podcast can be a really low barrier to entry way of exploring something. And I think one of the benefits of getting to explore, and this will go into We Read Smut, because you can start a podcast by anything, you just showing up and talking. But I think one of the benefits of saying, I have this real interest in this area, and why would I turn it into a podcast? Well, one way, one reason I think is because as soon as you put the name podcast on it and it goes out to air, all of a sudden people who might not otherwise have a conversation with you about that thing you're interested in are like, sure, let's have a conversation. So in your case, you're getting to talk to authors who otherwise would probably be like, Alesia, why am I going to get on a
Right.
call with you? Right. I don't want to talk to you about my book, but you're getting to talk to authors that these are books you're reading and that you're interested in and that you love, and you get to have conversations with them. And it's simply because you have a podcast on the thing. Right. And I just
Right.
think that's so interesting for us. I got to recently have a conversation with Mickey Kendall, who wrote Hood Feminism, somebody I really love and respect because I have a podcast. I got to have a conversation with Koa Beck, who wrote White Feminism, a book I recommend all the time. I don't think either of those women would have had conversations with me so easily and willingly if I hadn't said, oh, we're going to record it for a podcast. Even though selfishly,
Right.
it was really like, I just want to get to have a conversation with you. I've been in conversation with your work all this time. I love what you do. Like, wow. So I'm assuming that's part of what's been exciting for you with this new project is you're getting to have conversations with some cool ass people.
Yeah, I actually realized that with the podcast on podcasting first because there were people like I started listening to podcasts around 2015. And so I had been listening to podcasts well before I launched my own or started my production agency. And so there were people that I reached out to have like to talk about their podcasting journey and experience. And I was like, there is no way at all that this person is going to say yes. And sure enough, they said yes. So it's like even right now, I'm doing your 100 rejections in the year kind of challenge. And I'm like, I need to ask more people because like, let's go higher because I'm not getting enough rejections. Now I'm booked
Really?
out 10 episodes. What am I supposed to do with my life?
It is
So
wild,
yeah,
isn't it? It's so fun. And I think, because sometimes I think people think, why a podcast? And again, you don't have to
right.
have guests. There's other ways to
No.
do it. But that is just one of those things. Like if you have a passion, turning it into a podcast, throwing on the, you don't even have to have camera, just throwing on the mic and just saying, I'm putting this out in the world, it suddenly opens you up as a journalist, as somebody that people will take more seriously. So I think that's cool. All right, let's talk about We Read Smut because it's clearly not directly related to your business, right? It's not about podcasting. It's not about business. It's not about any of the stuff that kind of you do that your money makers. But you started this thing again. You're interested in it. It seems like I just want to have these conversations. I think it's fun. I want to shine the light on these authors that aren't getting the attention, all of that. And then it kind of like took off.
Yeah.
What was that process like? And did it surprise you? I feel like it may, like, I'm sure you knew you had a good name. I'm sure you knew it was a great topic, but did you think the reaction would be what it was? And what was the reaction?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I started We Read Smut with a friend originally. And so it was co hosted on Instagram as just a bookish account. And I had said several times over about the year and a half, or maybe it was 2 years that we had co hosted it. I said, I want to start a podcast on this. I want to do a podcast. She was like, I do not have capacity. And I was like, I respect that. Also, we should do a podcast on it. Right? Like, this is something that I'm passionate about podcasting. I love having conversations. I knew it was something I wanted to do. And so when she left to then explore her own curiosities and like now her Instagram's like all about Disney and she's like healing her inner child by going to Disney all the time. Like totally love it, respect it, awesome. When I ventured kind of away from, all right, I'm going to kind of own this now. What does that look like? I started thinking about how my reading journey had moved, where I started with, all right, what are the ones that are popular that everybody's talking about? To now, what are the ones that I'm actually finding my own identity? I'm an Afro Latina woman. I'm bisexual, married to a man. Like, I have chronic pain? Like, what are those reflections of my experience and where are they? And it allowed me to kind of see my own heritage in different ways, which I love. So I was like, okay, let's have more conversations around this. And so I started kind of making friends. And then I was like, all right, I think we're going to start this podcast in the new year to like, let's see how it goes. I knew I wanted to do seasons because having had an ongoing podcast, I didn't want to burn out. And I also didn't want to pressure myself to invite people on who weren't a fit just because I had to fill an editorial calendar. Like that was something I knew I didn't want to do. So I knew it was going to be January to May and then June off and then July to November, December off. Cool. There are my seasons. I was having a conversation with someone for one of the launch episodes and they were like, "Hey, you should check out Substack." And I was like, I don't need another platform. Like, isn't that just for like writers? Do I really need that? No, probably not. I started it just because. Let's just see what happens. A year and a half later, somehow there are 15,000 subscribers over there. I don't know how that happened. I mean, I know I created content. People are interested in the topic. It brought people in. Awesome. Okay, what does that now look like going forward? And how do I utilize the audience I've built to make that shift of less of podcasting unlocked, more of We Read Smut? But one of the things that I found really awesome about having the podcast is now I'm at the point having, 3 seasons under my belt where I'm getting on calls with authors who I have never met in real life, never seen them at any events or anything like that. I've never interacted with them on social media, but their publicist said, "Hey, Alesia wants to have you on her podcast. It's called We Read Smut. Are you open to it?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I know Alicia's content. Absolutely." So like now I'm getting to that point where I'm like, little old me. I'm literally just over here reading my smutty books and talking about them. That is it. So I would say I was very surprised. And now it's a matter of, okay, let's put on my quote unquote business hat And then how do I make the most of it where I can create a community, also make money because capitalism, but create a community where I can have even more fun with this? And then what does that look like going forward?
Well, I want to talk business and community, so that's perfect because my head obviously goes to if you're not going to have the people who run a business when they start a podcast in service of the business, the idea is that it's somehow a part of their sales funnel, whether that's lead generation or it's nurturing their existing kind of clients or helping people make that decision to go into purchase mode, whatever. If your podcast is no longer part of that, how are you viewing this podcast in your business ecosystem as its own business, still somehow in service of your other business? Is it able to make enough money to be worthwhile? Do you see it eventually replacing the other business? Sort of like, where's your head at with that, where it's at in the ecosystem of what you do?
Yeah. So right now it is passion project at this point. Like that is where it's at. And with the recent shifts, business wise and community wise, of like, what do I actually want this to look like? And even thinking about broader, okay, how is this not just, all right, content I'm creating, conversations I'm having, but a way to support or put back into the community? Does it look like, hey, I'm going to create a sponsorship for, new BIPOC or LGBTQIA plus authors who are up and coming, who just need a little $500 support? What do those micro grants look like? And does the community want to match that grant, right? Like looking at ways to kind of broaden it and expand it to even more than just, hey, I want to have a community, give me money. Like what are ways that I can make this something more and also be really passionate about it and continue to be passionate about it? I think I see it eventually replacing the business. I don't think I will ever stop editing or doing the production side of the strategy of podcasting just because I love it so much and I love being able to like create a project that I can control to then put out into the world. So maybe I'll keep one or two. Maybe I'll shut down my micro agency, but I can see myself bringing my team along of like, hey, do you guys want to come along on this side? I mean, my team's been with me for 4 years now, so I don't see it them going anywhere anytime soon. Where even I had mentioned it to my team members today, hey, I'm doing this kind of shift on the business side for We Read Smut. If the Discord gets too crazy, I need you in there because I know you have community management background. And she was like, say less, I'm there, let's go. Right? So like they're coming along with it just because they know me, they like me, they trust me, and it's income, right?
You have a
Capitalism again.
Discord and a Substack?
Yeah. So with the new community, what it is that you on the paid tier, and it'll be $15 when I launch it live to everyone right now. It's for subscribers. $15 a month, you will get a free ebook for the themed because I do a BIPOC trope challenge every year. For the last 2 years, I've done it, where every month it's a new trope, and then you pick either a BIPOC or LGBTQIA plus author based on that trope, just to kind of take tropes we love, but read more diversely. And so they'll get a free ebook based on that, which is quite finagling with Kindle Unlimited. I'm not allowed to get Kindle Unlimited books because of contracts and licensing deals and all that stuff. It's quite a mind boggle, but I'm learning. And so they'll get a free ebook. They will get two virtual silent book clubs, one at lunchtime and then one at an evening time through the month. And then the Discord we'll talk about the book that you get that month, kind of have more of a discussion, more of a daily check-in, what's your pet tax, all that kind of stuff, just to make it more than just, hey, what trope do you want? And can I recommend you a book, right? Like I just wanted it to be more community side, which Substack's great for that, but I wanted something deeper and I knew Discord could do that a little better.
Well, and let's finish up here then by talking about community on two fronts. One, just what you are learning about and trends or changes you're noticing on podcasts as a podcast host and as somebody who helps production on podcasting and you're very hooked into the podcasting industry. What are you noticing about podcasts and the community element of that? Because I feel like in the beginning of podcasting eons ago, like really going back, like there weren't live podcasts recording. There weren't all of these, there weren't a lot of Discord servers and things like that for those kinds of things. And that seems to be happening so much more. So what are you noticing as far as if you're starting a podcast, is community something that you should be thinking about? Is it easy for people to do? Is
Right.
there an investment there? What should people know?
I don't think it's easy to do, and I don't think you should start it out right out the gate. I think that if you realize, hey, this is something that I want to create for my community, or this is something that I've been asked to create, then it's worth considering. I think that with the rise of AI and AI slop and just the algorithming of the algorithm, so many of us want human connection. Like, we are craving it. And even just quote unquote, post-pandemic, right? Like, we want community, we want spaces, and I'm finding those are the places that I am enjoying the most are those community spaces. I don't want to be in other spaces at all. And so finding those that are kind of maybe outside of the social platforms, I think are really helpful. So if you are considering it, I would look outside of social platforms. So maybe that's a Substack, which is still kind of social. Maybe it's a Patreon, which I know they're moving more towards the social, which is very interesting to watch them navigate and adjust
Same as
that with
Substack,
their
yeah.
yeah, their new feed is annoying, but that's just my opinion. And so, yeah, it's really interesting to see, but I think that just wait until you're ready. I don't think it's easy. I think it's difficult. Like I said, once it gets too messy, I'm hiring someone to help me manage it because I know I don't want to be in there 24/7 and I know I'm going to need support. So, is it worth it? I think so. I think it's going to be incredible. I think I'm going to be able to have better conversations and kind of use the podcast as this ecosystem of we have this, here's the book that we have this month. Cool. I interviewed that person in season 2. Go back and listen to that episode, right? So it's kind of a funneling them through the content without it being an actual quote unquote funnel.
And helping people find each other because people want to find each other. So if your show is about something that people unite around, then it makes a lot of sense to do that. But I do think I love the advice of waiting because don't rush into it. You got to make sure that you have community. Are people even wanting that? And then
Right.
do know it's a lot of work. And so under promise and over deliver and keep that going because it's easy to start thinking of all the things you want to include. And then suddenly you're way overcommitted. And speaking of community, obviously you're part of the Feminist Podcast Collective. It happened since day one. You're one of the OGs. And I'm curious about just community. I'm not looking for you to like boast and brag on podcasts on the FPC, but just on the idea of being a podcaster, which, part of the beauty of it is you can do it at home, alone, in a closet, right? Like you
Right.
don't have to have anyone around. You can never have a guest. You can put out a podcast and there are podcasts that are successful that way. And that can be really lonely. So what do you see as the benefits of as a podcast host finding whether it's FPC or some of the other there's networks out there. We're a little different because we're more about community than about network, meaning ads and that kind of thing. This is more about finding your people so that you aren't doing it alone. But what do you think are the benefits of being part of something like that as a podcast host? And what is it for you? What are the benefits?
Yeah, I would say I've been part of several communities over the years of just being a business owner and being in the business space. FPC is my favorite.
Well,
Hands down. Like,
and I
I
didn't
know
pay
you're
you
not
to say that.
asking me to
I
say
did not.
that, but
No, I did not.
honestly, it's one of my favorite. And anytime I'm like, "Oh, you're a podcaster? Ooh, we have aligned values. Go check that out." I'm always like redirecting them to FPC. So, what I love about it is the range of experience. So, you have people who are very experienced in podcasting and people who are new, and there are no dumb questions, right? Like, we're all kind of learning as we go. We all, need support in some way. Just the community aspect of, hey, we're here to support each other. We're here to uplift one another. That there isn't a competition in this space. It feels really united, and I feel like I'm always learning something new, which is surprising for me, being in the podcasting space so long. I'm usually like, there's nothing that can surprise me. And here I am surprised. But yeah, that's what I honestly love. I love the community aspect. And that's why I stay, is just to be able to have other people who you can talk to. I mean, there are stats out there that say when we're in community, we live longer, we're happier, have healthier lives. I think it's important.
We probably all also podcast longer because
Yeah.
I think there are many times I would have quit. I mean, the truth is I probably wouldn't be podcasting anymore if I wasn't in FPC because I have stopped and started several shows like you have. But the thing that keeps me going again is because I'm like, I know I have support and care
Right.
and people I can lean on for help. And if I didn't have that, I think I might have quit and just been like, I don't know if I want to do this. So I do think there's some
Yeah.
value in that as well. But just like we think about building communities for our podcast as hosts and understanding the value of that, there's like value of being inside of communities yourself. And I think before starting a community, you really should also make sure that you are in communities to see how
Right.
they operate. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's important. How should we finish this?
I honestly think it's find a community. What is an interest you have, whether it's your podcast or something else, where you want to be in community with other people? I think that it's so needed right now. I think a lot of us feel siloed in our interests. Maybe it's a puzzle community or just something that is outside of your business, outside of your daily thing, outside of parenting. Like find something outside of that that lights you up and
Yeah, because
find community around that.
having We Read Smut has really, like, it seems like it's reinvigorated you, which is amazing to have those. And I think we all need that. I think maybe I'll do this. What's the worst piece of podcasting advice you've ever been given?
Good Lord. Probably that you have to make the most of every episode.
Mm.
You don't. Some are duds, and that's okay. You know, like,
Every episode's not your best episode.
no.
Listen, even Meryl Streep has been in some real duds of movies. I think that's valid, totally valid. Then what's the best podcasting advice? Or like, what would you want to tell somebody?
It's probably what I tell people now that I've shifted from just kind of gotten looser on this concept is do what works for you. Like find what other people are doing, pick and choose what feels right and aligned for you, and do more of that, not what people say you should do. Don't let people should on you.
You know I hate shoulds, so it's
Yeah.
fantastic. No more shitting on ourselves. I love it. So where do you want people to go to learn about you, to get more?
I would say if you're interested in podcast strategy or my podcast on podcasting, go to helpmypod.com. And if you're interested in smut, go to wereadsmut.com. Super
Terrific.
easy to read, to write down for you.
All right. Thanks, Leisha.
No problem.